Welcome to Living and Learning. This is a curated series brought to you to help you navigate through this thing called life. If you've been doing life for long, then you are already accustomed to the patterns of life, the highs and the lows. Some lows can change the trajectory of your life. It can have you wonder where you belong, or it can have you succumb to its accompanying narratives that you are just basic. While some highs can even drown you, the question here is, how do you not get lost in both? Join me in the living and learning. I am your host, Kede Eten. Hey guys, you are welcome to episode 1 of the Living and Learning series. I hope that you all are keeping well and staying safe. Today I have titled what I'm sharing with you guys as I am not as beautiful as you. I am as beautiful as me. Because this is a truth that I struggled to accept or come to terms with for a very long time. But before we take a quick dive into today's episode, I'd like to remind you guys to please subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already. Help me share the link to this podcast on all of your social media platforms. You guys, thank you so much as you continue to support me. Everything that is wrong with anybody stems from their childhood. A lot of people are going about doing life unaware that some of the choices and decisions that they make are being influenced by something that happened in their past. The early years of everyone's life are the most delicate, and experiences gathered during those years can either make you or break you. I was speaking with a friend recently who confessed to being a good cook. He cooks for himself, he enjoys his food, but he took a long break from cooking from the time that he was a teenage boy to now that he is an adult. Reason being, he cooked for his dad when he was a teenager, and his dad did not give him the approbation that he was expecting. And so he thought of himself as not being a good cook, and he locked up and would not let anyone to taste whatever food that he cooks. This is because his father's validation about how his food tasted mattered to him. Now, this is just a slight example of how narratives that we create during those early years can get stuck with us. Growing up, I had so many insecurities that ultimately altered my self esteem, that made me unable to properly assert myself, that made me lack self confidence, and I just had low self esteem, inferiority complex. I had insecurities about my body, I had insecurities about my skin, and I had insecurities about my dentition. Now I know that all three are going to sound paradoxical to the people who do not know me well, the people who see my pictures and my videos, and the thoughts that will come to mind is, how is it that the image that you have been projecting to us is this person that you are describing? And that is why it is important that you do not say anything on social media and then draw the conclusions on your life that it sucks. Before we carry on, I'd like to establish some truths here, and that is, I grew up in the village. I am a proper village girl, and so my account of my story is based on the environment that I grew up and the information resources that I had at my disposal at the time. I was raised to believe that as a woman, your primary achievement goal in this life was getting married. Having an education and career was a good thing, but they were considered a subsidiary achievement. The major achievement here, or the Oga Pata Pata achievement, like our comedians will say, was getting married and having kids. And then I was told that men did not like fat women, that if you were fat, you were going to be a lot fatter when you got married, and you were going to be a lot more fatter after childbirth. And I was a fat baby girl growing up, and so I guess that was where the insecurity about my body began. As I was developing into a woman, I started having stretch marks. And stretch marks at the time was a fat sentence. If you had stretch marks, you have been sentenced to be fat for the rest of your life. Like there is no escaping of this one. And if you had them in revealing areas, they were often the center of attention. People can't help but stare. And some people can even take a step further to ask you questions about it. And so it made me always covered up because I didn't want people to see the judgment that was already pronounced upon me. And that was where the insecurity about my skin kicked off. And that's my dentition. I had a tooth growing on top of one of my incisors. My mom took me to the dentist. They had it filed down. But that tooth became sensitive. And so I always avoided that area when I was brushing my teeth. Soon it became scarred. And then one day in secondary school, I had an altercation with one of my classmates who I had written his name down among the names of noisemakers. And because he was punished, he decided to exact his revenge on me. As I was running away from Ephraim, I fell. I broke my tooth. He didn't stop him from beating the hell out of me that day. But that's by the way. I broke my tooth, and I remember going home that day. I was unable to face my mom. I could only answer her questions looking down. That would then become my new norm, talking facing down, or not talking at all, or only talking when I was comfortable with the people that I was with or familiar with the people that I was with. I had this vague idea or interpretation of what I thought perfection meant, and by my understanding of what perfection meant, I considered myself to be unworthy, undeserving, and unqualified. Now, all these experiences happened, say, my early teens or my mid teens. You guys have to pardon my breathing. I'm even so nervous talking about it. Okay. Now, all of this experience happened, say, my early teens or my mid teens. I had no idea when I started becoming my thoughts. I just know that even into my adult life, the feeling of being unworthy, of being unqualified and undeserving made me remotely servile. I became socially withdrawn and I was always reticent. I was reticent whenever I was with people that I wasn't familiar with or people that I wasn't comfortable with. Friends who knew me then can attest to these parts. I became a keyboard warrior. That was the only channel I could express my emotions or tell someone who had done anything wrong to me that you had made, as in you had offended me. That was my only avenue of sending my message. I was a keyboard warrior. I often deflected when people gave me compliments, and I had this exaggerated concern or worry about what I imagined people thought about me. I had situations where people, even the ones that I considered to be friends, took advantage of the fact that I wasn't forthright, I wasn't confrontational, that I wasn't able to articulate my thoughts, and could do anything they wanted to do with me and even get away with it. I would go home sitting in anger, brooding all night, chastening myself on top of it, asking myself all kinds of questions like, why were you unable to speak up for yourself? Why are you not speaking up for yourself? Why can't you tell this person that you do not approve of the way he or she treats you? Da, 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 da. It goes on for a very, very long time. I think even to my 26th year. And then one day, I just decided that enough was enough. I wasn't going to, be this broken girl anymore. I wasn't going to be anyone's shadow, and I was going to find my voice. I started taking inventory of my thoughts. I started assessing my life, and soon I discovered that while I was thinking these things as a little girl that I was at the time, they were becoming ingrained into me. Because now I am an adult, I have been able to lose the weight. I have had a teeth makeover thanks to one of my best girls. And I am more aware of the fact that stretch marks is something that both men and women, young and old, have, and they are learning to embrace their bodies. But my self esteem and self confidence was not restored. The feeling of me being unqualified, unworthy, and undeserving did not go away by knowing all of these things. I discovered that I did not love myself. And so, for the first time, I took myself to the mirror. I was naked and I took a proper look at myself. That would be the first time I was doing this because I was so used to looking at myself fully in the mirror when I was fully dressed to see the fitting of my dress and, you know, telling myself I looked beautiful when I had a makeup on. And so I had been so detached from my body that I wasn't nurturing myself anymore. I took myself to the mirror, I looked at myself, I was naked. I will face myself, I will face the mirror, turn back, sideways, and I looked at myself, I was like, I am going to love you. I told my body I was going to be your best friend. And it's almost as if I could hear my body screaming, oh my God, I have waited so long for this to happen. Self love is something that we all chorus, but how many of us truly and intentionally love ourselves? 7 out of 10 women do not love their bodies. And this is not something that we sit down and decide one day to not love our bodies. I believe that we are taught to not love our bodies by all of the standards by which we are being measured by. I decided I was going to love myself. I decided I was going to love all of my broken parts and all the parts of me that I perceived to be flawed. And oh my God, excuse me guys. It's so emotional to me. And so I decided that I was going to love myself, all of my broken parts. And the parts of me that I perceived to be flawed, I started daring myself to, put on clothes that were revealing and be comfortable with them. I started daring myself to speak up for myself more, stand up for myself when I was unjustly treated. I started daring myself to be comfortable saying no and not feel bad about it. And it's been a journey. It's been one day at a time. I haven't arrived. I am still working on myself, but I am better than the girl that I used to be. If I had to go back to that little girl that was insecure about her body, I would tell her that, hey, there is something called gym, or there is something called weight loss, and there is something called healthy dieting, and you are always going to lose this weight. If I had to go back to that little girl that broke her tooth and started talking facing down, I would tell her that, hey baby, you are beautiful and you can always have a teeth makeover when you are grown. If I could go back to my little self, I would tell her that, hey girl, your purpose on earth isn't going to be stymied by all of these things that are happening, and there is no such thing as being perfect. But I am grown and I forgive myself for the mistakes that I made in my ignorant state. Now, I don't know what your experience is. I don't know what your story is. Yours can be a lot more intricate than mine. It could have been domestic violence, it could have been abuse, it could have been rejection, it could have been the loss of a loved one or anything. It could have been anything. And I'm in no way suggesting the equivalence of our experiences, but we do have one thing in common, and that is how it has shaped us. Mental incarceration, y'all, it is the worst form of confinement anyone can find themselves in. The things that we think, those narratives that we tell ourselves, they are the strongest. And so we owe it to ourselves to set ourselves free from whatever is trying to hold us bound. You owe it to yourself to no longer live your life based on standards created by a prejudiced society. You owe it to yourself to live your life to the fullest, that your self esteem and self confidence isn't contingent on the validation or affirmation you get on the outside. You owe it to yourself to no longer measure yourself by anyone's standard of beauty, anyone's standard of success, or anyone's standard of perfection. You are as beautiful as you. You are a unique individual, and only you can do the things that only you can do on this earth. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, I would like us to interact, engage in the comment section. You guys share the experience or insecurity that you had and how you were able to overcome it. And if you'd like to write to us, if you'd like to share your story live or anonymously, feel free to do that. Email us on thelivingandlearning@gmail.com. If you want to talk anonymously, no problem. We can be the conduits between you and the people. And yes, you guys, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, please help me subscribe and help me share the link on all of the social media platforms. Until we meet again next week, Friday, you guys stay safe. Thank you guys so much for listening.